Hey everyone, so this is part two to our last video where we're given a graph and we want to write the equation for that graph. We're going to start off with the same principles. So I'm going to write down my x-intercepts, and in this case it is x is 5 and x is -1. What's different here from our last graph is here we have a relative minimum at that zero, that root. And so when that happens, and even if it happens where there's a relative maximum, where that turning point falls on the x-axis, it really shows us that that zero really needs to be accounted for twice. Okay, so because there's this turning point at -1, I'm going to rewrite that -1. I'm going to use it twice. Okay, and so now we need to know our y-intercepts, and in this case, our y-intercept is point 0, 5, and that's this point right here on the graph. I'm going to use that same equation that we did before, but here's the difference. Okay, I know that the x equals 5, that root turns into x minus 5. And now I know that I have x equals -1, and I'm going to use that twice. So that turns into a +1, but I have two of them. And that's because that turning point falls at that specific point. Okay, and if you want to see why, it's really because this can really be written as f of x equals a x minus 5 and x plus 1 squared, right? And so what ends up happening is if you were to solve this, right? So let's say x plus 1 squared. When I take the square root of both sides, it gives me it gives me x plus 1 equals 0 and x equals -1. But it really only takes account, that would really mean that the graph kind of looks like this. And it doesn't do that, right? It flips and it turns back up. And so that is why you need to make sure that you account for it 2 times. All right. And so the rest of the process is the same. I know that this is going to be my x value. I know this is going to be my y value. And so my y value is 5. I have a, and I know my x is 0. So this is -5 and a +1. So 5 equals -5a. A is -1. So I'm going to go back to my equation and I'm going to substitute in, right? And you can also write this as f of x equals -x minus 5. X plus 1 squared. And the great part about writing these equations is you can use your graphic calculator or you can use Desmos to check, does this equation look like my graph? Do they match? So these are questions that you really shouldn't get wrong because you have that easy check. Use the calculator to check and make sure.